Hello everyone, welcome to Hope Ninja Parents, and today we are talking social media, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So jump in and join us. All right, oh my goodness. We have been waiting to talk about this one for a little while. So welcome to today, Hope Ninja Parents. I'm Cynthia Painter, mindset coach, and we have Dr. Louise Metcalf. Tell us all about yourself.
So I'm a psychologist for almost 30 years. I'm a mum, and I'm the founder of Gheorg, the little robot who helps kids with anxiety and to build resilience.
Beautiful. If you want to know more about Gheorg, his details are in the descriptions, so follow up from there. All right, social media. We did do another episode that was on screens, so go check that out if you haven't already. And we deliberately wanted to pull social media apart from it because we could talk for hours on social media. So I want to start with a definition. Yes, I thought I would be clever, and I looked up a definition. So definition, right? Social media, websites and applications that enable users to share content and participate in social networking.
Awesome. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, right. So that would actually take us right across the gambit of being able to participate in networking being conversations, and also being able to share and create. It's a big part. You know, we use the words influencers, creators, all those sort of things in social media. So we could talk about YouTube. We could talk about gaming sites and things like Discord, which has those conversations. And we could even talk about kids' Facebook, kids' Messenger. Let's be specific, kids' Messenger. And we might touch on this, but let's play with the big guns, the most common stuff here for social media. And I know that there are kid-friendly versions. Feel free to let me know in the comment boxes what they are. But, you know, we're talking the Facebooks of the world, the Instagrams, you know, and so TikTok. Oh, thank you for reminding me of TikTok. I'm on TikTok. There you go. These ones. Of course. You haven't seen my reels on Instagram. All right. So like there's all these really easy ways to interact and create content. In fact, if we talk about Facebook for half a second, Facebook actually, who owns Instagram, actually has a mission and a video mission about creating collaborative experiences in communities. They want us in tribes. Their mission is to have us that where we, and their intellect or their AI or the algorithm, whichever way you want to look at it, is designed to show you content that you like from the people you like. To the point of, and I just want to highlight this, to the point of, it's not just if you like a person's page or a particular person, but if you always like their live video content, then they're going to show you live video content over their posts. Right? This is how it is, right? And it's created a whole pile of currency, right? Social media has created this currency, which I think is astonishing if we really step back of it, this currency of likes, you know, even on LinkedIn. For the big adults here of us on LinkedIn, right? You got this currency of how many people are following me or liking me or like my content or did anybody do that or so forth. So this is huge, right? And at the time that we've done this particular video, Facebook has gone through, if we talk Facebook, we're not here to bang on about Facebook, but we're talking social media, it's the most common one. In fact, our kids will say it's the least coolest, which is why we're on it. But they're in the middle of bringing out Facebook for kids and so forth. They're going through court systems at the moment, pulling them up on privacy, on research they've shown, the negative impact of Instagram on young girls and teen girls. It would be, I don't know why they're saying girls, so it would be both girls and boys and teenagers. Yeah. And that they were putting, you know, profits before people, and they wanted to launch their kids' version of it, which is we're now realizing even more dangerous idea. And literally at the time that we're recording this, there's talk about them rebranding themselves or even changing their name. So watch for that. If you go back and go, what was Facebook?
It's just a cynical exercise, that.
Right, but this is it, right? So it's really taking a hit. So there's some interesting from a branding perspective. All right, so there's all the definition and so forth. We're playing with stock standard social media here. There's the FOMO, there's the connection, there's the sharing, and there's the comparison. Ooh, okay, take a breather. Well, we've said it's the good, the bad, the ugly, there's the hidden impact. So I really love, Louise, if you could share the way you describe social media, because I thought it was really, really great and builds on what Facebook's talking about, community.
Yeah, okay. So the way I talk about social media is firstly starting off with the device, right? Because it's in your hands, it's very tangible. So most people look at their devices, as we talked about in the screen podcast that we did, and because they feel quite tangible, they almost feel like a book. Feel like I'm totally in control of that. And that is something that you want to stop thinking, particularly in relation to social media. It is a big old doorway to a very, very big city. That's what you want to see it as. Maybe each app is a different city, but it's still the same thing. You're walking into a very, very big city. And just like any big city around the world, even in the places that we might really love, there are beautiful parts of that city, there are ugly parts of that city, and there are scary, ugly parts of that city. So that is a great way for adults to think about social media, but also a great way to talk about social media with kids, really accessible, because most kids have been to a city at some point, they don't live there, and have seen that there are ugly parts to it, so that it does kind of make sense to them.
Yeah, very true. And even within that, you have little communities, right? If I think of here in Sydney, we have Chinatown, we have all different elements, the botanical side of it, or the more arts district. So you have all these little communities of people more likely to like-minded or interested hang out together with as well. And even within those communities, you have your good, your bad, and your scary, ugly as well. So a really great way to do it. The other way I often talk about with Facebook or any of the social media is it is designed like a casino. It is designed for you to lose a sense of time and for you to never leave. That's why there's a scroll. We actually talk about it, procrasti-scrolling. Who's ever procrasti-scrolled? Me, I've also procrastinated, I've procrasti-cleaned, but I've procrasti-scrolled, right? So you lose a sense of time. You do this, I'll just check. Yes. Right. And then you are scrolling away and it's been half an hour and it's like, damn, right? It's same with the kids.
I was going to do something, wasn't I? What was I going to do?
Right. Or the kids are like, are taking a break. Oh, God, and then it's bedtime before they know it, right? So you actually lose sense of time. Just like casinos are done exactly the same way. You don't know time of day. There's generally no clocks in the place. You don't have to usually get up. Drinks are brought to you, all these sorts of things, right? So it is so that you don't have an idea of what else is happening in the real world. And because they are designed to feed you the content that you like in the way you like it, why would you leave that buffet, right? So it's chocolate fondant, chocolate fountain, and prawns. Beautiful. So why would you? Yeah. Why would you do? So I think we've got to understand that they are designed that even though they're fun things and our friends are on it, or people we know, or people we aspire to, or people want to be connected to, people who educate us, interest us. It is an organization. Let's just make sure kids and adults understand these are businesses. Right? They get paid by people putting in advertisements, sponsorships and so forth. It is a business and they are measured. Some of the measures they go by are length of time. How long do you hover over a video? How long do you hear, right? This is why Instagram and TikTok have taken off with their 30 and 60-second videos, right? Because our attention span now, with the amount of content that's come out, particularly during COVID, we have so much content out there that you need smaller digestible pieces. Our attention spans are actually reducing to that of, I think, about a goldfish. Right? So you've got to be able to, and as people who are putting content out are getting flashier and more smarter about it as well, to get that attention, get the message across quickly. And it's sort of like, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? So
there's also an effect of that scroll, you know, the procrasti-scroll, which actually affects your memory. So it's because you read something, you think, you know, I think we've all had this moment, you read something, you think, I must remember that. And then you keep scrolling, and you've scrolled a few times and you're like, what's that thing that I was going to remember?
Yes, 100%.
It trains you because it's on the screen and you don't actually have to remember, but you're also moving on very quickly to another piece of information. It literally trains your brain not to put things into memory. Even if you consciously go, I'd like to remember that. Yeah, it's not going to get put there.
Beautiful. So we're going to talk I was almost going to go to dating sites, but we'll stay on kids because dating sites are the same. All right. So if we look at the impact on kids, there is good in social media, right? We want to make sure we're painting you a whole picture here, right? There is good elements of social media. We have seen cultural change. We've seen movements like Black Lives Matter and so forth. All these things have been exacerbated, shared, communicated quickly. That is like one of the best things. You can get information really quickly throughout to a lot of like-minded people in a short period of time. I want to keep just bringing it down to school-age children and teenagers. They can get in touch with a cause. They can follow someone that they really like, that they find inspirational. They can share their own bits. I mean, the amount of TikToks that came out of lockdown, and the parents are in there to learn their bits as well with the kids.
Family activity, positive family activity. I like that.
Yeah. Music oriented, particularly if you look at TikTok, music is very good for the soul, changes our moods. So
you can learn new things. How many people have learned how to make that tomato and feta one dish thing, right?
Oh my God. Yes, all the hacks we didn't know about in cleaning our kitchens. So arts and crafts, 60 seconds is a long time. I remember training some people in this before, and Facebook was saying that it really likes 10 and 30-second videos, and they're like, how can you do anything in 10 and 30 seconds? Well, you can. And it's really easy for kids to be able to do as well. So let's talk about what the good impact is on social media as a general for kids and teens.
Yeah, I think for me, the most amazing thing that social media gave us during the pandemic was that connection, right? I mean, none of us had a social life, but at least we had our social media, and you could, think, oh, well, I still have friends, they're still out there. So it certainly kept us connected in a time when being connected was extremely difficult to do. So you've got to give it credit for that. And certainly I think the change campaigns are awesome too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember for Sydney, we've had 2 major lockdowns. And in the first one, in my community, we started seeing this thing on social media about teddy bears in the windows.
Yeah.
So we put our teddy bears in the windows, and when we went for a walk, the kids could see that there was other kids around, and they could see my teddy bears in the windows. So it is a great way to connect, be inspired, and an outlet to create, as well as an outlet for socialization. I think particularly of tweens into teens, because we weren't able to effectively leave out the perimeter of our homes. It was a way for kids to keep connected with their in real life friends.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really good like that. I mean, I sometimes think back to the days of the Spanish flu, right? And most people didn't even have phones. So think about how much better our social lives were after they finished their pandemic, right?
That was 100 years ago, so none of them had phones, but maybe, I don't know. Let's not go there. Yes, right. So different, right? So what's a good thing from a mindset or from a hope? We did touch on with screen time that too much screen time can reduce or thin the cortex. Remind me if I'm wrong, right? Where critical thinking.
Yeah, critical thinking is affected.
Yeah, and that impacts our hope circuitry, so our hope circuit and our ability to do hope. What is a positive impact on social media from a hope, from how people see themselves and how they have see opportunities in the world?
I think the biggest thing is it kept our communities together. It really kept us connected. So we kept our sense of tribe, sense of connection to others that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And how many people are connected to their old school friends that they would not normally be talking to, but maybe you were egging each other on with the vaccine. It's like, I got mine before you.
Or the taking the trash out. We got dressed up to take the trash out. Right?
Awesome too. I was part of that group. I loved it.
Yes.
Right? We kept our tribes, and that's pretty remarkable and pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it did keep a spirit of hope. It did keep that connectedness. It did give us an outlet. It did have us inspiration. This is for our kids as well, right? To be able to go out.
If our teenagers were only talking to their parents, right, that whole time, that would have been pretty awful. So at least they got to have conversations with friends online.
Imagine if their parents were only talking to their teenagers in that.
Let's not go there. That's really.
Yes. So outlets, connectedness, the tribe. So social media living up to its mission in that respect, which is great. And that creation. We do just laugh about TikToks and so forth. But yes, some things to be able to create, people doing YouTube channels and so forth, which is social media by definition. So those are all fabulous, right?
Yeah.
What does social media what is the impact we don't realize or is a little unseen with social media?
The big one you want to think about is, even though it's called social media, it's not exactly the same as socializing. Yeah. So talking to people, we're keeping our communication and our tribes going, and that's awesome. But the thing that we get from socializing in real life that we don't get from social media is the facial expression part.
Yeah.
And that's very important. So we don't tend to get from social media, you don't tend to get the mood lift that you would normally get from talking to, say, a friend in real life, face to face, because you don't get the facial expressions. Yeah. So it's social media, but it should be social media in inverted commas. That creates some interesting follow-on effects, right? Like, you don't get the facial expressions, and that's a big impact, but you also don't get tone of voice. So we pretty much read everything in our own tone. Yes. So, if you get a message on social media, which is like, this is awesome, and you're having a bad day, you probably read it in your tone of voice as, this is awesome. Right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, what might be really good intention to become sarcastic, and I think we've all had that experience with text messaging as well, right? It's the problem of not having tone of voice. You don't actually get an experience with another human, and that's quite an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's for me, when I think about social media, there's two big elements as well. I mean, there's quite a lot. We really could talk for hours on this, but two big elements if I think about it for kids and mindset perspective. One of it being that FOMO, and we mentioned that a little in the screen time episode, of that fear of missing out, the anxiety of something that has changed. Has someone posted something? Has someone liked my thing? That sort of element. And then there is the measure of self-worth. that comes out of being on it, whether that's a comparison element or, again, how many, I know my kids talk about being YouTubers, as that's come up at some point, but influencers, putting that out, how many likes and so forth do I have? So yeah, I'd love to talk about those two elements as well, that anxiety producing element of always checking in and keeping up to date with stuff. And then let's look separately at that whole comparison element of it.
Yeah. So basically, that's a very strong kind of message, isn't it? Like the more likes you get, and it's very public as well, and the more followers you get, you're somehow a better person. Now, if you kind of delete social media and go back a few decades, right? That happened in school, but it didn't really look like that. So you had people who were more popular, but then you had people who, had their bunch of friends and were just happy with their bunch of friends. And what social media does with all those likes and follows and stuff is that it really takes a very dominant one model approach to popularity and goes, that's how everyone should think. That's the norm.
Yeah.
And that's what really messes with all of us, actually, but kids in particular, because they're not ready to think through this stuff critically. And often they don't understand what the technology is doing anyway, so like thinking through, is that really how we think about popularity? Is that what popularity looks like in your family? And like that's possibly a totally different value set, maybe, and talking that through with kids, right? It's a very, very dominant model. So that's not just in places like Instagram. It's in places like I think Instagram changed theirs a little bit fairly recently, but it's still quite strong there. And you've got things like LinkedIn, and it's just everywhere. They kind of took one model and kind of cookie cut it into every social media platform.
Absolutely. And it's a measure of success ultimately. How many followers have I got? That Facebook as well was moving from likes for pages to followers of pages rather than having both. But still, there's that metric, whether you understand it or not. Has someone liked my post, right? Has somebody, commented on what comments? I know I work with people who are concerned about doing things like live video because of the haters and the trolls and that acceptable behavior in some aspects to just come out and rubbish people, the things that we will say. And you worry about that for kids, right? Because they're learning that behavior. We used to only learn from our family and our immediate area, right? We were our schooling influence. Now we can be influenced from someone on the other side of the world, right? Who's got their own agenda, consciously or unconsciously, of what they're wanting to do. And we take it up because it's on the computer, so it must be real, right? If it's on the internet, it must be true. And being able to pull out that real life element, what is actually real life when it comes to this? We were talking just before this episode. I talk a lot in a comparison, right? So we used to compare ourselves to the Joneses, how the Joneses doing. And the Joneses used to be in our neighborhood, or our big town, right? And then they became, as we got higher density population, they were in our street or neighboring street. Well, the Joneses are now, in our phone, which is in our pockets and in our bedrooms and on us effectively 24/7, right? Sometimes we even take it to the bathroom. We should not do that. But don't do that. It's unhealthy, or unhygienic. But we have our Joneses. So when we think about that for kids, they don't realize, and I also talk about what we're seeing on social media in any form, whoever's posting it, is their highlight reels, right? And we compare them to our backstage, which is a bit messy and boxes everywhere and a bit dusty, and you're climbing over stuff, and you're in your tacky dacks and so forth, right? And the hair's in a bun. So compared to someone's highlight reel where they've taken 15 photos and then filtered it on their lunch. And this is the thing also, important for our kids to understand that social media is generally not actual real life. And it's interesting because we would have been having the same conversation about magazines 10 years ago.
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
actually even still prominent now, but the Dolly magazines or whatever ones, teen magazines, the same, even our adult magazines. Oh, I don't mean adult. I mean like a Woman's Day. Leo.
Another podcast.
Watch out for that one, ladies and gentlemen. So, even, well, to be honest, they're not real life either. There's a lot of photoshopping.
No,
Most
stuff on the internet. If it looks glossy, it's even vaguely glossy, right?
Yes.
You're looking at something that's been doctored, right? Like,
just think about it this way, like I really want to hone this point in for the adults that are listening along, and then we find a way to explain it to our kids. We used to have a Polaroid, right? Or we used to have cameras, right? That we could get 24 on it. If you're lucky, you got a 32. And then you take it down to the chemist or to like Big W, and you would wait a couple of days. And then you would get them back, and then you would look at the photos and you see the one, right, all these photos. Now we take 15 photos and still go, is the chin right on this one? And when we never look at the damn photo again anyway, right? After we post it, whereas they used to end up, we pick the good ones and they'd go in the album or on the wall, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's
we're used to looking at our friends and family like that, and red dots, and like got used to seeing people in weird states.
Yes,
well.
But that was actually just to seeing people in their backstage, right? So in the imperfectness, I think imperfection. We need to embrace imperfection, right? Too many people trying to make it perfect or right or hit all the boxes, right? But we are wired to care about what other people think. So let's talk about that for a second. How can we take all this? We just ranted for a second. Okay, it was just me, right? So bring it back to our kids, right? Our school-age kids, our teens. How do we help them with this? Because this is insidious. This is the stuff that we have bullying out of this. We have things like anorexia. We have depression. We have all sorts of things that can ultimately come out of this. We know that there have been plenty of kids, unfortunately, who've suicided. It's a big deal because our brains are wired also to try to be accepted, right, by our tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. So social media. That was
a big intro.
I love that rant. Okay, so social media is, again, sort of the eyes economy, right? They want to, as we were talking about before, they want to suck you in. They want to keep you on the device, on the app. The more that you're there, the more money they make, basically. So you're using it for free, but that means that you're the product, right? Yeah. And looking about that product, is that product, about our better natures? Or is it about our not so good natures? And as we talked about before, there are some good aspects to social media, right? That's their marketing, And some of it is, it is true. It is how we use social media. But then you've got this other part of the product, which they certainly would not mention. Okay, so FOMO, definitely one of the effects of social media, fear of missing out. There's a pressure to respond, and most adults have felt that. So times that by a million, and you've got pretty much, what teens and tweens feel about that. Feelings of not being enough, absolutely, because you're being shown all these, front window shots of people, as you were saying there. It's so effective. It's so effective for us to think, oh gosh, I'm not as good as that, because we're looking at ourselves in the mirror in real life. It also encourages us to practice narcissism. So you're looking at those photos of yourself, picking the most perfect, but you're also, when you're posting about yourself predominantly. Yeah. So of course, we all post about other people from time to time, but largely it's about self and in your own life. And that we also have an effect that it creates a sense of isolation as a result. So that may sound really contrary, right? We're using social media to create tribes and connect to people, and yet we've got this sense of isolation. But the isolation comes from that sort of, darker nature problem of the narcissism, talking about self, and that whole kind of, this is my front window, and of course I don't have any, a back area. I am perfect, right? Like that's how that happens. We feel isolated. We're like, God, I'm the only human here, right?
Yeah.
As wrong as that will be. So yeah, all these effects of social media, which come from the productization of not our better natures, but our worse natures. Yeah.
Oh, right. A lot, right? All right. So what do we do now? Look, actually, before we do that, we do have to just tiny bit touch on, because it's just a part that can come out of social media, that there obviously is the ugly, scary stuff, right? So do you want to explain it, or I can?
Oh, I can go there,
Go for it. Go for it.
I talk about this all the time. Okay, so you got your ugly stuff in the big wide city, which is basically the stuff that, kind of happens between friends, and the terrible truth is that most online abuse comes from people that we know, friends and relatives. So that's grounding. It tells you a little bit about our own kind of evolution as a species, I think, about how we're navigating big, online social groups. And we have some work to do. Adults are guilty of, trolling and, keyboard worrying, right? So, kids, of course, are also struggling with that problem. You can look at that problem and go, oh, this is bad people. But, psychologists never go that way, because it's not helpful. It doesn't help anybody, actually. It's kind of go, oh, that's bad people. So we talk about it as, something you need to learn. And that's exactly what's happening there. You need to learn stuff. Okay, so then there's the really, really scary, ugly stuff. And so there we're talking about people who are predators.
Yeah.
Predators come in all shapes and sizes. They can be female. A lot of people think they're just male. That's not true. So predators are the person you would least assume to be a predator, basically. They don't all look like lonely old men who can't dress properly, right? There's a very famous predator in Australia that, yes, most people will kind of put in their head. That's what a predator
the visual scary guy that you would creepily go, he's a creep, stay away from. Yeah, that's your stereotype.
It's a stereotype and not helpful, right? As a parent, you've got to be aware that predators come in all shapes and sizes, and adults, and that is a big problem when kids are on a big door that leads to a big city. They are out there. They're definitely out there, right?
And they're clever.
They're so clever.
Because they're purposeful. They have an intent.
Yeah, and they won't approach your child largely as themselves. They usually approach children as children. So that's not always the case, but it certainly happens a decent amount of time. So it's very easy to be fooled, and that shows you how clever they can be.
Yeah.
And they groom, the objective is to basically, get the confidence of the child, and then to actually get some kind of leverage over them. And more up to date, there's this thing called capping, where they encourage children to take one exposing photograph of their bodies, and then they say to them, if you don't give me more of these photos, I'm going to release this original photo to all of your friends. So then kids feel compelled to keep sending, graphic photos of themselves. So they're out there, that happens. Don't be fooled into thinking that any site with kids on it that is a social media site is safe from them. because that's certainly not how they think, right?
No, no, that's their playground, unfortunately. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, they aren't a huge number of people, but it does, if you're looking for statistics, it is surprising about that number anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep that in mind. Now, as a result, right, because kids, not every kid, certainly not every adult can spot a predator. So how much should we expect children to spot predators? 0, right? And so there are things that are very necessary, and that is monitoring children's use of social media. You do have to monitor. It's better to be really open about that with your kid. Talk to them about how you're checking their social media, when you're checking it. Talk to them about what you've seen. Talk to them about the friends that they're connected to that, you both know and maybe don't know, so that you can show that you are checking everything. And that way you can have the conversations that will actually help your child to draw boundaries for themselves, when they're older, and say, no, this is uncomfortable. I am not going to participate.
And this is a really, I think parents can find this really challenging, right? Because it takes effort. Not that I'm saying that they're lazy, but it does take effort to do that and do it regularly. You've got kids who are, from a child to a tween to a teen, varying levels of go away, this is just my computer, I'm just playing a game, you're such a boomer, which is an adult that has no understanding of technology. You don't get it, I know better. Kids, don't they think they know better, right? So I think just being aware that people talk about having maybe a digital contract or having those things are really important. A friend of mine used a great analogy with her kids and even with mine to go, I wouldn't take you to a freeway or a highway and just let you run.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't just let you go and say, see ya, in a couple of hours, enjoy yourself, right? So why would I let you go on to the worldwide freeway without, supervision and support and checking in on you? So I think these are the times when we're a parent, not a friend.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Really, really important. But it's also then goes hand in hand and I don't care how old your kid is you can always start today, and that is open communication. So I think one takeaway particularly is, regardless of all these things we're talking about, social media and other topics we've talked about as well, is open communication, reflecting back feelings and making sure the child feels heard and understood. As a child gets older into teens, they need to feel like they're part of the decision making. They want to have options. They want to feel like they can actually contribute and take some of the direction. So do work on communication, that they can come and tell you anything, right? And you're not going to dismiss them. We sometimes dismiss things to go, oh, it's not so bad, because we don't want anyone to feel sad. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. It'll be great. Oh, I'm sure Johnny didn't mean it that way. Listen and take them at face value, right? So they feel heard. Yeah, because then they'll bring you the other stuff.
Yeah. And that sense of discomfort around people and not wanting to, kind of hug people, maybe, it's like I probably had this in your childhood as well, whereas give Auntie so-and-so a big hug because they came all this distance, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know them, and they smell really funny,
Mothballs. Yeah.
Right? But you do it as a kid because your parents tell you to, and we really want to step away from those kinds of encouragements as parents now, and just encourage kids to have boundaries and to think about, do you want to hug this person? And if you do, I'm here, so it's okay. If not, that's okay too. We're not going to push you to have a physical contact that you do not want to have.
Yeah, and I really liked, we were talking about this before we went into the episode, about sitting with them, working with them, so that they get a point where they can make great judgments on their boundaries.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very important thing. And, don't be afraid to have conversations about, predators with kids.
Hmm.
I was reading the fabulous eSafety website the other day, and there's a great post on there by the commissioner talking about, how she speaks about that to year 3 students. So you can talk to kids quite young about predators.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had this in your childhood as well, but in my childhood, it was just don't speak to strangers.
Danger, danger.
What does that even mean? Right? It's just,
The entire world is a danger because they're all strangers.
it wasn't very informative and wasn't very useful. But the more that you actually help kids to recognize these dangers, to be able to pay attention to the signals that they can certainly pick up on,
Yeah.
and to go to trusted adults that they know that they are safe with, the safer the world gets. So these are good conversations to have, and you can have them quite early.
Yeah, and as I said, I'd take this right across the spectrum of social media. So having these conversations on a TikTok that they're watching, or on a Instagram reel, or something that they have been watching or that they've seen. Even quite useful to have conversations when you're watching movies or TV shows together and something's happened. Maybe someone's been bullied, or somebody's got FOMO and trying to get everyone to like them, or any of those things. Then to be able to have a conversation about, what do you think about that? How does that make you feel? What does the other person think? So to play out some of those conversations when they come up in other areas, to draw the tangents for the kids as well. And particularly if they are posting. So if we talk about them posting stuff, that's a whole other thing, right? Because they've gone and decided to share something, whether they've made themselves a video, a TikTok, or a picture of themselves with their siblings or their friends doing something. I think it's worthwhile having a conversation, and we're talking school-age kids here, so primary and high school, having a conversation on, at some point, what is the purpose of that?
Yeah, and also to think through where you have control of it and where you don't.
Yes.
So while you've got it recorded on your device, assuming you're not uploading that to the internet, right, which I don't do because that's too tricky for me, right, that's on your device, you're in control. You can delete it. You can also, defrag or whatever it is your phone so that it doesn't show up on some kind of FBI thing, right?
She's the technical one in this pairing, just so you know.
Right? Thank goodness for real IT people who actually know this stuff. So basically, right, you got control, but once you press send or upload or post, you've lost control. That can go anywhere. People can do things with it. People were manipulating Barack Obama while he was president, right? So, who
was the guy gosh, it was hilarious. It was the latest inauguration, and the guy was out there with his gloves on, and there was memes of him in all different ways. It was hilarious and funny, but it is an example, right? So, for example, I don't post photos of me and my kids, right? Because those photos, they don't have decision making over what happens to photos of them. So you generally, extraordinarily rarely, you'll see a photo of me and my kids, because those photos can be played with, changed, right?
For sometimes, in good intentions it turned bad, and sometimes for bad intentions, right? I mean, yeah. And the other thing you want to think through as a parent when you're posting photographs or information about your kid is the long-term life of it. So I don't know whether people predicted that Facebook would still be around, after it's like, decade longer maybe. But it's such a behemoth that's probably going to be around for a few more, right? You never know.
Yes.
So what you're posting up there is basically the resume of your child, right? So you want to think about that when that search happens by their employer, when they're maybe 18, there's certainly people working on how to do this. They'll trawl the social media and go, what is this person really like? Now,
Well, what are they showing us they're like? Yeah.
Yeah, well, they kind of confuse the two, right? And there's like, we hope at some point there's some wisdom that kind of goes, what, the brain does grow and people change, but maybe not. That wisdom might not appear, or people might get even trickier around it. So you think about that long-term life of the information that you put out there, and very much get in your head, but also kids' heads, that once you press send, upload, post, it is no longer in your control.
Yeah, and it's not your ownership.
Yeah,
it actually belongs to the platform.
Yeah. Yes, you are the product. You're absolutely.
You are the product. Beautiful. All right. So communication, really important, so that they can communicate with you, but also having that education awareness piece throughout times without, I think, like I said, watching movies and
things. What you experience, right? Like, we've all bought stuff on the internet and we get it back and we're like, oh my God, it's nothing like the video on the internet, right? So you can talk about
pictures of McDonald's hamburgers, right? It's like,
right.
That is not 6 foot tall hamburger, right?
Yeah. This conversation can happen every day almost, right? Like, yes. That's not what it really looks like, or that isn't, like you see they filtered that. Or, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, even in, if you're sitting there watching Frozen or watching, something else, you can have these conversations without being derogatory, without being lecturing, but even just what did you think about that? Or how did that make you feel? Or, because a lot of those shows also show a definitive good or bad, black or white perspective on things as well. So great in all sorts of contexts, particularly with social media. Yeah. So to finish up, because this is really juicy, to finish up with this, we do talk about hope. Hope is the ability to ride the waves of things that life throws at us, and having ability to see opportunities. So what can we touch on to finish off around the impact of social media on hope, and not diminishing it, but actually growing it as us as parents and custodians for our kids?
Yeah, I don't know whether you've heard that. Apparently there's no specific source for this, but there's a story that apparently comes from the Cherokee in the United States, pre-United States obviously, about the two wolves, and this one is despair and the other is kind of hope, and the story goes, who wins? And it's the wolf that you feed that wins. And I think this really applies very well to social media, because social media at the moment feeds both wolves, right? I've heard Facebook described as the rage machine, and that's a very good example of how it can feed the despair wolf. It's like, this gets looks, we'll just keep pumping it, pump. Also, cat videos, they're kind of cute. So that's kind of that's a good wolf thing, right?
Yes.
So pump. So it's feeding both wolves. But I think what this conversation kind of gives us is a chance to go, we can be deliberate about this. We can kind of go, I'm not going to feed the despair wolf. I'm just not going to do that today. I'm not going to do that this minute, right? It doesn't have to be for a whole day that you are that deliberate, but choose. I go, I'm going to feed the hope wolf. I'm going to, if I'm involved in a discussion on Facebook, I'm going to find a way to get people to see that they have more in common than they don't, right? You can be a little bit mischievous about this.
Yes.
But find ways to, connect online, but feed the right wolf. Yeah. And that drives, a lot of good stuff in a lot of people's lives if they see it, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great thing that we can do with our kids as well. So I think we've had a few things for you guys here today. We've really sort of broken down and talking about, feeding the despair or just feeding the hope. I think that's great communication. Looking at that, I think that's pinnacle. As in any relationship at all, but particularly with a child and particularly on social media, we want to keep the communication open. Awareness and education, so important. You know what? That means that we have to keep it on top of it as well. And if that means we're watching TikTok videos, then get on board, babies, because that's what we're doing, right? So you've got to stay current with them, because otherwise you have no credo with the kids. So being able to do that, and monitor. They're not going to like it, but we are their parents or guardians, not their friends. And that is our job. It's not always going to be a child choice ultimately, because they just like the pleasurable stuff. Don't we all?
Just like us.
Just like us. Now, if you want any help with dealing with particularly school-age children in primary schools, with helping them with their big emotions, we do have Gheorg, who will see the details in our show notes, in our descriptions. So Gheorg app is a kid-friendly robot that is a check-in for kids on a semi-daily basis to help them with their emotions when they're feeling sad or angry or feeling low, and is a really great little app that we've been working on. So go check it out if you have any questions. And if there's anything you want to let us know from today's episode, we'd love to know your questions. If you have any suggestions on topics you'd like us to talk about, we've got many more to come, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, if you want to reach out and contact us, you'll see the details. You can comment, or we'll have some contact details. You can find us as well. Thank you again for today, Dr. Louise. And it's a bye from us, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Bye.